And thank you for joining us for another conversation of with Mudasir and a special guest today. We have Jodi Brown. Mudasir will try to join us here in a bit, if you will. He's definitely going to be looking to join us. But ever so briefly, before I introduce Jodi, my name is Sai, and I am a transformation and change agent, if you will. I really like to partner with organizations at every level to help them calibrate their business models and operating models for maximizing their impact. One of the key things I focus on is being a catalyst and alchemist, and really helping organizations and individuals embrace what I like to call the sacred triad: reality, their own, if you will, identity, and their own nature, to ensure their aliveness and have that impact in the world. And ever so briefly, I'll make a few comments relative to Jodi before we dive in. This is an individual who truly has an impact in the world and continues to have an impact. Ever so briefly, I will not be able to do her justice by any stretch. So ever so briefly, she's a brain tumor survivor. She's a professional speaker, author, consultant, and coach. Her motto, which is very powerful: every interaction is an opportunity to change a life, which we'll definitely be diving into as we have the conversation. As she likes to say, therapy has given her an up-close and very personal look out as to how it feels to be on the receiving end instead of the giving end of life. And that's very, very key. And of course, her struggles, as she'll share, have amplified her desire to encourage giving and good. We will definitely dive into The Sun Still Shines. And by all means, I can't do her justice, as I said. So with all that being said, Jodi, welcome to the conversation.
I'm thrilled to be able to be here and have the conversation with you and share a little light and sun with the audience today.
Wonderful. We're very, very fortunate to get time with you. So thank you for making the time, Jodi, all around. And would love for you to tell us, who is Jodi Brown?
Well, it's a great question. It seems like it should be easy enough to answer, but in this day and age, there's actually probably two different parts of Jodi. And that is who I am now versus who I was a dozen years ago before my life had this change. So I'll give you a quick intro to who I am now before we dive into a little bit more of my story. So now I am a professional speaker, trainer, development, and doing training and development to help teams and leaders become anti-fragile. And of course, that's one of our hot topics, something that we're passionate about. Sai, you and I both are very passionate about it and share those messages. And I have written 4 books now, and I train and speak to companies all over the world. But I love working with teams and helping them grow stronger, become more cohesive, have greater strength when they work together, and being able to grow and benefit the whole as well as the whole company because of the strength that they have. I am married. I have 4 children, 2 of whom are still at home and 2 have already moved out. I'm not quite ready for that phase of my life to be over. I'm hanging on to those children at home and begging them to never leave. But overall, I would say life is wonderful. Things are great. I'm still married to my best friend and living the best life that I can every day.
Beautiful. I love the humanity injected in just the expression of where you are and what have you.
Well, one thing I have certainly gotten to experience, especially in the last few years, is the depths of humanity. And we can ride high highs and we can ride low lows. But I think it's when we appreciate and understand that we're all coming from this place of being real humans on this planet. And that's one of the things that draws us together, or should be able to draw us together. And when we look for those similar feelings and emotions and experiences that we have, that is when we are able to strengthen who we are as a group, rather than being divided into all of these little tribes that we seem to have these days that are all divisive and tearing people apart. I think we need to be coming together more often and see the humanity within each other.
Beautiful. Jodi, do you want to share more about your journey at all, or dive into sort of the kind of the background and how you got to where you are today, my friend?
Sure. I would love to jump in and do that. So what I will tell you, Sai, is that I was living what I deemed to be my white picket fence life, Okay, so you picture what you think of as a child as, oh, what am I going to achieve? What is my life going to look like when I'm older? What do I want to achieve? Well, that is where I was. I was married, 4 kids. I had 2 degrees. I was working in the nonprofit field. I was running a nonprofit organization that I loved. I was doing good in the community, and everything was, in my mind, pretty much picture perfect. And then I started having some issues with my health, and I didn't recognize at first that these were symptoms of a larger problem. I just started thinking, what is going on? Why am I getting dizzy every time I'm trying to go out and run in the neighborhood with my girlfriend? We would go jogging every morning, and I started just having issues because I was so dizzy that I could hardly put one foot in front of the other. I was having to stare at the ground just to make sure that my feet were in the right places. And, I went to the doctor, and he said, oh, you probably have an inner ear infection. Dizziness has a million different causes. I'm sure it'll go away in time. Well, one thing added to another. And what started with very extreme dizzy spells then added massive migraine-like headaches, which was very unusual for me. I had never been a headache person. Then I started having bouts of vertigo, and then I started having ringing in my ears. And this took place over the course of about 8 months. And it wasn't until all of these things compacted on top of each other, because I went back to the doctor for each of these symptoms individually. And it wasn't until they really started compacting in my life and having a major impact on my ability to function that my husband actually said, Jodi, there's got to be something really wrong. There's got to be a cause, and we need to figure out what it is. I know you've been to the doctor over and over again. I think we need to go back. And so I made another appointment with the doctor and explained the situation. We did a series of personal histories and blood tests. And I'll never forget, they called back and said, okay, well, your blood test came back and everything's fine. And I thought, no, everything is not fine. I was so dizzy and debilitated by this point in time, I could hardly walk down the hall in my home because my head was just spinning all the time. And so I finally kind of insisted, and I said, everything is not fine. Go back and ask the doctor what the next step is. And the next step was an MRI of my brain. And when I went into the hospital for the MRI of my brain, I didn't even leave the hospital from that test before having information, because the MRI tech actually ran to the changing room after I was dismissed, and she said, the radiologist is looking at your scans live as they come through. And so he just finished looking, and he's not sure, but he thinks he sees something. Would you be willing to stay, do another MRI? This time we'll put some contrast dye in your veins and we'll see what's going on. And it was in that process that we were able to discover the root of the problem. So by the time I got out of the MRI machine, the MRI tech actually helped me up. And then she looked at me and she said, there is definitely something there. Go home and call your doctor immediately. And good luck to you. And she threw her arms around me and gave me a hug. This from the tech in the hospital who does this every single day. And I thought immediately, wow, she knows something that I don't know. And by the time I heard from my doctor that afternoon, and he explained what the radiologist had told him, then my doctor called a neurosurgeon, and then he called me back and says, we've got an appointment with you for a neurosurgeon. This was a Friday afternoon that I got this call. He said, I explained the situation to him, and he cleared his schedule so you can come in Monday morning at 8 a.m. And I thought, what? Like 2 days from now? I mean, you can't even get an appointment at a doctor without waiting a couple of weeks. And again, I thought, he knows something that I don't. He explained the situation to the neurosurgeon. So by the time I went into the neurosurgeon's office on Monday morning, he looked at me and said, I'm sorry to say, Mrs. Brown, but in the world of tumors and of the brain, it's all about location, location, location. And your tumor is in a very bad location. And that was when I discovered that I had a giant, or not a giant, but a moderate-sized mass between the end of my auditory canal and my brainstem. And for a variety of reasons, mostly for the fact that it was partly wrapped around my brainstem, he and the entire healthcare system deemed me to be inoperable. and they were unable to do anything at all for me. So it was a pretty overwhelming and devastating experience to leave the hospital with my husband, having just been told there was nothing anyone could do to help me. It was a pretty trying and traumatic experience, as I'm sure you can imagine.
You'll have to forgive me if I get emotional, Jodi, because I'm with you. I'm with you.
I still get emotional, and it's been years, and you'd think that I could talk about it without getting emotional, but it was such an emotional experience that took me to the depths of my soul and to, what I believed and who I am and all of those things, and thinking about my family and how do you go home and tell 4 little kids that the doctors are sending their mom home to die, that they didn't give us any hope. So it was a very tricky and traumatic time for us. But I will tell you that the community saved me, both literally as well as metaphorically. They came and they took over my life. They started bringing meals in, taking care of my family, taking my kids to the school and to their appointments. And then also someone came up to my husband at work and said, hey, one of my best friends is a neurosurgeon, and he is at the Huntsman Cancer Center. And I called him, and he said, he'll see your wife on Friday if you'd like the appointment. And we took that appointment and went to the hospital 2 days later and found out that neurosurgeon had a 4 to 6 month wait to be seen. But because my husband's friend called and asked, we got in just 2 days. And it was that man, Dr. William Coldwell, who looked at my scans and quietly yet confidently said, I think I can do this. And in that moment, he changed my inoperable tumor diagnosis to an operable tumor diagnosis, which literally saved my life. So today I am a huge proponent of having a strong community. And that is part of the reason why. It is not just so that you can be rah-rah cheerleaders for each other, although that's great and that's timely when you need it. But literally, you never know when something that you do for someone else could honestly be the means of saving a life.
Beautifully expressed, Jodi. Beautifully expressed. Do you mind if I ask a few questions relative to especially some of the key words that you used and highlighted?
Dig in. This is what we're here for.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I love where you started us off in terms of real humans. As you said, we are real humans. We don't need to be decisive and divisive, if you will, with one another, rather. So one question that comes to mind when you got the news that you were fine, as they said to you, if you will, as you said it, do you feel like perhaps we as human beings maybe lean toward certainty, the positive, the known? We kind of almost project our ego so that, hey, you're fine. Nothing's wrong.
Well, I think certainly we depend more on certain kinds of technology. In this case, it was medical tests, and they were more likely to believe the results that were quote unquote proven in front of them than to believe me. And that's not to say that they wouldn't have believed me, but what I realized in that moment was I had to advocate for myself, because obviously whatever was going on was not showing up easily. And that was the first time that I really had to push against a doctor or a system and say, no, I don't care what it says. You need to listen to me. And that later became a big part of my journey because when I was finally hospitalized and had surgery, a whole host of things went wrong, amongst those that went right, but a whole host of things went wrong. And I found that I had to become an advocate for myself. And at times where I was literally unable to advocate for myself because I was not conscious or I was too ill, my family had to step in and advocate for me. And that's not to say that the medical professionals don't have your best interest at heart. They do, but they only know the information they have in front of them. And I think we are too quick as individuals to trust whether it's technology, whether it's medicine, whether it's what the test results say, as opposed to the person. Again, as you said, going back to that humanity aspect, why do we believe everything else but we negate to listen to what the person is telling us. Because when there is something wrong, you tend to know that within yourself, and you have to listen to it and you have to advocate for yourself. But we need to do a better job of validating the experiences that we as humans have, whatever that may be, whether that's a medical condition, whether that's the way that we're feeling about something, whether that's a hunch we have. We have these feelings for a reason, and we need to do a better job of acknowledging and appreciating and listening to people and hearing them out from their hearts and minds.
Beautifully expressed. And that sense of awareness, self-awareness really helps drive, and the courage to be able to exactly advocate for yourself and push on the doctors and the technology and whatever it might be, if you will, in this case.
And let's admit it, that's not easy. I mean, we have people here who have multiple degrees, who are the best of what they do. In this case, literal brain surgeons who are cutting people open and hold their lives in their hands. And they are looked at, I mean, pretty much at the same level of rocket scientists, right? I mean, there's just a few levels of people that you say, wow, these are the smartest of the smart. These are the best of the best. And so to push against that a little bit and say, no, we need to do more, or this isn't working, or please listen to what I'm telling you. And that was a tremendous gift and blessing, that when I went to and found Dr. Coldwell, that he was exactly that kind of person, that he wanted to hear what I had to say and wanted to hear the experiences that I was having. And he did eventually tell me, I want you to listen to yourself and your body. There's going to be lots of residents that come in and ask you questions. I was hospitalized at a teaching hospital, which is great. We got to help pass some of the knowledge on to others. A little tough when you're going through it and you get to help teach the next generation, sometimes through their experimentation on you a little bit. And Dr. Coldwell told me, like, you need to listen to yourself. You need to trust how you are feeling, and you need to trust me as your primary doctor. But all of these other residents and people who are running in and out of your room, take what they say with a grain of salt, because they are very much in the learning phase, and they're guessing and experimenting on you, which again was both good and difficult. Ended up causing me lots of complications and sometimes grief and pain, but also turned out to save my life another time, when it was a resident who was able to figure out a complication that I had been experiencing. And so, you have to give them the grace of realizing that they're in a specific stage of humanity and they're learning, and you might be the means to help them learn those lessons they need that will make them better at what they do.
Very well said. And the sort of a thought comes to mind, and very, very, very interested in your perspective on this. As you went from the inoperable message to the operable message, and we have one of your quotes, of course. I love how you described it. I want to throw the quote in, and please elaborate. You talk, at some point in time, we all have to choose, if you will, relative to our wounds that define us or refine us. Can you share a little bit of insight as to kind of what you experienced, my friend, as you kind of had those two polar messages and what you experienced there?
Well, I'll tell you that going into it, I was absolutely naive. I knew only the things that I was being told and the things that I could find on Google, which was scary because Google had way more information than I should have read at that point in time. But we went into it fairly naively. And I know that ignorance truly is bliss, because what you don't know is actually good for you, because it would be much more challenging sometimes to go into things if you knew the extent to which they would create difficulty and challenge in your life. So I think it's good that we go into things naively optimistic. But I'll tell you, I was a conquer the world, get her done girl. So of course I was going to go in and think, I'm going to be the one who's going to come out of this with the best case scenario. They're going to go in, they're going to take this tumor out, and my life is just going to go back to normal. That was what I thought. And in the process of these procedures, so I went into the hospital with the hopes of having one brain surgery and spending 5 days in recovery. But that's not quite what happened. Instead, I ended up having 3 craniotomies. I had all of the complications pretty much listed on the sheet that I signed my name and said, yes, I acknowledge that any of these things can happen. That included facial paralysis, a spinal fluid leak where spinal fluid was actually drifting down my throat and leaking out of my nose.
Wow.
I had a complication called pneumocephalus where air got into my brain through the hole where the spinal fluid was leaking out. Air was able to get into my brain. That's a potentially fatal complication. And I just had issue after issue, side effect and complication, lost the hearing in my right ear. And so my one surgery in 5 days turned into 3 brain surgeries, 35 days in and out of neurocritical care, fighting for my life. And that turned out to be just the beginning. After my hospitalization was over and my life was deemed preserved, since then, I've had an additional 12 reparative and reconstructive surgeries to try to mend and fix all of the things that went wrong in the process of saving my life. So I have really had the opportunity to decide whether I was going to become bitter or I was going to become better, whether these challenges would define me or whether they would refine me. And I saw it happen both ways. I saw other people who faced their own but similar kinds of journeys who came out very negatively and who encouraged me to go sue the doctors and get everything I could out of those jerks because look at what they did to me.
Mm-hmm.
And all I could think of is, but look at what they did for me. Look at what they did for me. When everyone else said I was inoperable, they preserved my life. They made it possible for me to go home to my family, to be a wife and a mother, to go out in the world and take these messages and help be the means of providing hope and strength to people when they are going through things. And when I had that first conversation with someone who went in a very negative direction, I walked away from that home and immediately decided that is not the path I am going to take. I am going to come out of this being refined, being better, being stronger than ever before. And perhaps that's why the whole concept of becoming anti-fragile just really, really hit me, was I knew I wanted to become better and stronger. And when I started learning about anti-fragility and agility and resilience and really diving into the science of those things, then I had a path and I knew here are the things that I need to do in order to not only strengthen myself, but then be able to pass it on and help strengthen others.
Again, beautifully expressed. It didn't make you bitter. It didn't make you bitter. Yeah.
It didn't. And I don't know. What's the point in becoming bitter?
Well said.
It serves no one, yourself least of all.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see, I realized I was going to have the struggles no matter what, but becoming bitter was a choice. Mm-hmm. And I did not want to choose that route. I wanted to choose a route where I could be proud of myself and my actions, my family could be proud of me, and we could all become better for the experience.
Beautifully expressed. And you know, the thought as I reflect on your words, if you will, relative to your family, your community, your doctor, and you're going through they partnered. You all partnered with each other. You offered each other grace, if you will, relative to that journey and understanding along that journey. And it wasn't smooth. It was to be bumpy.
No.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of survival. You think of the way that the world started out and how did people survive? It was in these little groups. It was in these tribes where everyone looked out for each other. They had their roles to fulfill, and they literally carried the other members of the tribe through the things that they needed to go through. And unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, you know, now tribes have taken on a little bit different connotation and it's more of group against group. But originally, they were supposed to be groups that were there for each other and helped each other along the way. And what I actually call it now is my hood. I say, you know, just like you have your neighborhood or parenthood, A hood is a group of people you go with at a certain critical time in your life. You're experiencing parenthood with the other parents in your neighborhood when your kids are all going off to school together. The neighborhood, you think of the kids that you grew up around, they were a critical part of your life. They were so important because they were physically, in proximity to you at that time in your life. Well, these people became that for me. They were my pack of angels. They were my hood. They were the people who lifted me up and carried me, and literally and physically were there for me. And that wasn't for just a short period of time. That wasn't just when I was in the hospital, them taking care of my kids. I was unable to take care of myself for many, many months afterwards. And so even when I did finally return home, I could not drive. I could hardly walk. I couldn't keep food and fluids in my mouth, and needed help doing all of the things that this conquer the world girl had done for herself and for others for years. I suddenly needed help with. And all of these wonderful members of my hood partnered with me and collaborated in the most beautiful way possible and helped me be able to continue moving forward in life.
Excellent. Excellent. And Jodi, one of the other things that you mentioned, definitely, I'm reading again I loved your books, by the way. If I haven't mentioned it already, all of them, quite honestly. So you also mentioned, I've journeyed further down the road than I ever thought I would. I've seen things I never thought I'd see and can't turn around now, even if I wanted to.
Well, people ask all of the time, they come to me and they say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that you have been through this. If you could change it, if you could go back and have your life without it, would you? And I have to say the answer is no, because it is through these experiences that I have seen things, that I have been exposed to the greatest of humanity, to the biggest blessings, to the miracles, to the people who will step in and do what needs to be done in the moment. And I would not want to turn around. I would not want to change that. That's not to say I would wish it on anyone else. That's not to say I would want to go through it again. That's not to say I don't still have plenty of things that I struggle with because of it. But I would rather take all of those things on and be where I am and have had the experiences and the lessons learned and the changes of heart and the refining and the growth and the strength. I wouldn't give that up for anything.
Excellent. Excellent. Very, very eloquently described again. Another quote, and again, these are things that really struck very, very deeply as I've read your work. Every interaction is an opportunity to change a life. And you say you're grateful to those who chose daily to show love in simple moments and interactions, change lives for the better. It's very, very powerful relative to how we think about interactions as you described them, Jodi.
Well, for a while, I came to think of myself as being an expert on interactions, not because I knew how to do them all the right way, but because I saw the impact of what these little interactions did every single day. And specifically when I was in the hospital for long periods of time, and even the smallest interaction of someone coming into my room made a huge difference for me. When I was truly, truly fighting for my life, if someone came in and treated me flippantly and they didn't care, and I just thought, okay, if you're here and this is your job, is to help me and take care of me, and you can't see me and you can't see my humanity, then maybe I don't have any left. Maybe I really am just this body in the bed that is withering away. And at the time, what I needed was those positive, kind interactions. Within about a 10-day period of time, I had two very distinct and contrasting experiences that solidified this in my mind forever. Because I had one woman who came in, she was a CNA, and I had been very, very sick. I was bedridden. I was unable to get up the whole time I was in the hospital because of this spinal fluid leak. And so the only way I had to be bathed was to either have someone come in and bathe me in my bed, or they could roll me to a shower room. And she came in and rolled me into a shower room on this little plastic mattress. She yanked the gown off of me and threw it on the floor and turned on the cold water and sprayed me down. as though I were a car in a car wash.
Mm-hmm.
There was no humanity. There was no feeling. There was no kindness. And I lay there completely bare and shivering. And as those water droplets spiraled down the drain, I thought she was taking all that made me human and all of my dignity, and it was washing down the drain as well. It was a traumatic experience. And when she took me back to the room, she still didn't say anything to me. My body was still wet. She put the new gown on me, put me back in the bed, and walked away. And I just thought, what is even the point of trying to fight anymore? Clearly, all that was left of me was not enough. And it was a pretty devastating experience. And then a few short/long days later, I decided I was finally strong enough and realized maybe what would be good for me was to actually try and be bathed and be clean again, because that was a challenging thing in the hospital when you're bedridden and when you're hooked up to, 6 or 8 IVs at any given time. And I finally had the strength. And the day I decided I was going to take a shower, a young man walked into my room. He had long, brown, scraggly hair, young, what I would have at the time said, punk of a kid. Walked in and he went and wrote his name on the whiteboard where it said CNA on staff, Lucas. I was like, great. The one day I decided I wanted to take a shower and I had a male CNA. So quickly I decided what teenagers have proven for years and years, which is that showers are overrated. You don't actually have to take a shower to survive. Kids have shown us that. So I quickly decided if maybe I could just get my hair washed, that would be enough for me to feel clean again. And so I asked this young man, I said, hey, Lucas, are one of the other CNAs on staff, or one of the girls available that they could come in and wash my hair? And Lucas schooled me just a little bit. He's like, I can come in and wash your hair. Like, that's part of my job. And I said, okay, great. Thank you. And he came back after he finished his rounds. And in the most tender, gentle way possible, this young man poured warm water all over my hair, massaged the shampoo and the conditioner into mostly my scalp, because I didn't have a whole lot of hair left at that point in time. But he was so careful not to touch any of my staples or my scars. And with every minute that he massaged my head, what he was really doing was massaging that humanity back into me. And he was showing me that he saw me and that he cared. This was a process that probably could have been done in 5 or 8 minutes. But Lucas spent 30 minutes at my bedside, kindly, tenderly, gently caring for me. And it was in that moment that I realized every interaction is an opportunity to change a life. And the first interaction with the gal a week before had left me feeling hopeless and depleted and ready to give up. And on the flip side, the experience with Lucas made me feel hopeful, full of strength, seen, and ready to keep fighting for my life. And that quickly made me understand that we have that opportunity in the interactions we have every day. And it's not going to look the same as it did when I was in the hospital. But when we're going through the grocery checkout line, we get to choose whether or not we avoid eye contact and avert our gaze, or whether we look up and we engage in conversation and we choose to see the person in front of us and interact with them and do a little something to try and make their day better. And I know for a fact that those moments can be life-changing and can help take people where they need to go. There is going to be an impact of your interactions. You get to choose whether you are going to bring that positivity and that light or that negativity and darkness.
So well expressed, Jodi. And no interaction is too small. No moment is too minute, ever.
No. And even the things that you think could be negative in their very nature. Like, I had a gentleman at the hospital who came in and he had to take my blood. Well, that's not a fun thing. And yet he He came in with a smile on his face. He was kind. He was inquisitive. He asked about me. He got to know me and my family. And somehow Tyson's pokes never hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was because he had developed a skill or if that was because of the person he was and the interaction that he had with me. But we can be the means of that. Even in those little transactional things that we're doing, we can make sure that rather than seeing it as a transaction, that we see it truly as an interpersonal interaction instead.
Very well said. Very well said. Ever so briefly, if you will, to the minuteness of it, I know, and I've shared a little bit with you about sort of my journey, and all it took was 2 words where I went in for a procedure, and the individual said to me at the end of her sentence, "My friend." That's all it took. Just those 2 words immediately brought a lot back, if you will. So nothing too minute ever.
No, not minute. And what did you need at that moment? You needed a friend. You needed to know that someone was on your side fighting for you and with you. Because when things get tough, sometimes we feel like we don't have the strength to keep fighting for ourselves. So we keep fighting for those who are fighting for us. And for that doctor at that moment to acknowledge that you were a friend and that they had your back, I mean, that brings so many unsaid messages with it all at the same time. That was probably just the strength that you needed to keep going.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Jodi, as folks listen to and what have you, I would love for you to kind of share how you've taken that journey, that experience, and as it continues to unfold. I'll phrase it as a question, if you will. If there's one thing, just one thing that you want leaders in leadership roles and that have impact, if you will, to really take away from your wisdom, what would that be, my good friend?
I would say if I had the chance to share just one thing, Here's what I would share. And that is, I'll give you a quick story and analogy. In the mid 1800s in Great Britain, there were ships coming and going from the shipyards all of the time. They were taking merchandise, cargo all over the world. And there was one gentleman who watched these ships come and go from the time that he was a young man. And he noticed that many of these ships would go out and they would not come back. And it challenged him, and he struggled with it and wondered, why are so many of these ships sinking? And so as he got older and started his career, he gave himself this challenge to figure it out. And what he determined was that these ships were being loaded according to their physical space capacity, but they were not taking into account the weight of the cargo. And unknowingly, they were sinking their ships because they were weighing them down too heavily. And one of the things that I teach leaders and that I emphasize to teams is that we need to do regular weigh-ins where we are able to have frank and honest and open and vulnerable conversations with each other, hopefully on a very regular basis. If you can do this in a daily morning huddle, at your weekly staff meeting, whatever it is, the more often you can do it, the better it will be and the easier it will be for people to be honest. But we need to be able to share some of those things that we think, no, that's private life. I'm keeping that separate. But if someone does not know the weight that you're carrying in your life, then even if they look at you and say, no, she's perfectly capable of handling that. She's handled things over and over again, and she can take on this problem. But if you don't know what I'm struggling with, if you don't know that I've been having dizzy spells for weeks and weeks and that I'm going to the doctor over and over again, then sometimes even the smallest things that we do may be inadvertently weighing someone down and sinking them. So the thing that I would encourage people to do is within your circle of safety, within your network, within your team or group, have these weigh-ins where you allow people to share with each other what is going on in their lives so that they can then share the weight. None of us can carry the weight of the world on our shoulders alone, but if we had a 2,000-pound log in front of us, if we got all of us together, we could pick that up and we could carry it. And when you allow others to see a little bit more, then they can help share the weight. Sometimes it also helps create conversations of, this isn't even that big of a priority. Maybe we can just toss that overboard. Maybe it doesn't need to weigh any of us down, or maybe we can save that for later. But when you really start to take a look at the things that you're doing and the weight that people are carrying, then you can help each other, you can share the load, you can share that weight, and you can effectively and safely all arrive at the destination with your ship and your cargo and everything intact. And so I would say, if I could only give you one message, that would be to have weigh-ins and start to become a little bit more vulnerable and honest and open with each other, which will also help develop that relationship within your team. It will help establish trust, and it will help you all succeed, not just in business, but more so in life as well.
Excellently expressed. And at the bottom of it, it isn't about just going through the motions. It's being real with one another, exactly where you had kicked us off as real human beings.
Real human beings. And even the story of the ship, it's not really about ships. It's about people. Yep. Because cargo and merchandise is one thing, but lives were being lost. And when we can compare, the whole analogy of, okay, it's not the capacity you have to look at, it's the weight that you need to look at. Again, it's about us. It's about looking at the people around us. It's about acknowledging that our children, if they have a big test that week, they might feel weighed down. They might feel a little more stressed out. And if we are aware of that, then we can act accordingly. If we know that someone is dealing with an aged parent who is struggling, we can be aware of that. If we know that they're having surgery, if they're in a big rush, if they have family, it doesn't matter what the situation is. If we are aware, then we can help share that weight and carry that load together.
Beautiful, beautiful. So if you don't mind, a few more questions, if that's all right, Jodi. I could talk to you forever, quite honestly. So, but we'll definitely.
I love it. This is what is fun, is to have these kinds of conversations.
So, two questions come to mind, and I'm sure people listening, if you will, have these sort of thoughts. Kind of, what is the greatest surprise? What greatest surprise did you experience about yourself, and what surprised you most about others?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the thing that surprised me most about myself, because as I mentioned, I've been a very positive, optimistic, conquer the world type A personality. I can honestly say that until that time in my life, I don't think I'd ever had a day of experiencing anything like depression or anxiety or any of those things that many people struggle with on a regular basis. And it was only when I came out of the hospital and my life was very, very changed, my physical body and my abilities, like the things I could actually do for myself and others, were greatly diminished. And I went to a deeper, darker place than I had ever experienced. And I didn't think that was within me. And I realized at that moment that I was equating my worth with what I could do instead of with simply who I am. Mm-hmm. And that was a surprise to me that, number one, maybe, and now I think of it and I realize, okay, I had never been there before. I hadn't been to that point in my life, but also what I got out of it, my kids actually helped me come out of it, because even when I was no longer able to do anything, my little guys, who at the time were 2 and 4 years old, they didn't care that I wasn't out running around on the playground. When I was laying in my bed, they toddled in and plopped themselves next to me, and we put on a movie and watched, or we read stories. And I realized I was good enough for them just as I was. No matter what I was able to do for them, it was who I am, and it was the worth of me as a soul and as a person that truly establishes my value. And when I got to that point for myself and realized, even if I could never do some of these things, it was okay. I was perfect just the way I was. And I truly believe that now. And I have stopped equating my worth and my value with how many things I can get done off of my to-do list, because I love to-do lists and I love to check things off those to-do lists. I'm one of those crazy people who, if I do something and it wasn't on my list, I'll go back and write it on just so I can check it off. And that was those were some huge surprising moments for me. Number one, that I had the depth, the downward spirals that I had, but two, that I also came out of it and realized is not about who who I am is not about what I do, but it is about the person I am on the inside and the value I have to offer the world. So that is probably the biggest surprise and aha I had for myself. I would say with others, I think the thing that probably surprised me the most was the lengths to which people would go to express their care, their desire to help, their love, to do something positive. I mean, so many things were done for our family. And again, and sometimes they seemed like small things, and sometimes maybe they were small things to them, but they were not small things to us. And so the fact that people on repeat were willing to do all of these things for our family, whether it was bringing meals, mowing lawns, taking my children places, giving me rides to the doctor when I couldn't do it for myself, that people at the heart of it are good and they want to help. And if they know how to help, and if they know, and if they are given opportunities, if we let them in and tell them what's going on, they will be there and they will come if we establish those relationships and have that trust and that kind of circle of safety with each other. They will step in and they will be there for you. And I have people who say, well, I don't know how you have that kind of group. I don't have a group that's that strong. And of course, it doesn't happen all at once, but it does happen through each one of these little interactions that you have, through these moments of sharing. You need to be there for them too. But I promise then in return, when it's your turn, they will come. And maybe that shouldn't have been surprising, but I would say the lengths to which some people went, and the consistency, and the people who just showed up time and time and time again. A friend who drove an hour and showed up at my door just to give me a hug when I was having a hard time and going through all this. The people who came to visit me in the hospital, who I didn't see on a normal basis, but they were there, showing up to let me know that I mattered and that they loved me and that they wanted to be there to help. That was a beautiful, tender surprise.
Very, very. I use the word eloquent. Very eloquently expressed. There's so, and you truly bring me to tears. I don't know if you could see it, but you truly bring me to tears in your story. It's very, very powerful, and the journey and the learnings that we could all take. You've used a word twice, if you will, in particular, and the context of the word. I'll say, I would love for your elaboration in any which way you take us. The word soul. You said this, the depth of my soul, as you had mentioned early. Are we better off going that deep in our souls, or are we not?
Oh, heavens, I think we are.
Yes.
To me, it's a no-brainer. It's when you have those connections with people and you truly see them not for this, but for this. That feeling when you meet someone and you have that immediate connection. It's like you've known each other, like you were meant to be friends. To me, that is not two physical beings meeting. To me, that is two spirits, two souls who are connecting or reconnecting, who are maybe having that connection here on this earthly life, but who perhaps sometime have known each other, or who were meant to meet and to be friends. And so I think the more we do that, the more we get at that soul level, then the more connections we truly have. And that's when the negativity and the divisiveness and the groups start to fade. I think if we took all of these people who are fighting against each other online and on social media, and who are against each other because of their political beliefs or their causes, I think if we erased all of that and blindfolded them and put them in a room together and just let them talk to each other and share stories and share experiences, that would change the whole world. Because all it takes is one small shared experience or commonality to have something that brings people together, to establish a relationship, to find that one little connection. I mean, you look at kids. A kid can be walking down the hall at school, and if he's wearing a Spider-Man shirt and another kid has a Spider-Man backpack, they're best friends because they have that one little thing in common. You can fill a stadium full of people who don't know each other, but they're there for a common reason, and all of a sudden they can see past everything else. And so it's when we get rid of this, what we see on the outside, and we realize that we have these common shared experiences, and that there's more to us, that we are deeper, that we have souls, that we have spirits. That's when it gets good in life. That's when you can go out with people and you know they know you, and you can spend 20 years physically apart, but the minute you're together again, it's like nothing ever changed when you know someone at that level. So I say, yes, open up, bare your soul,
Yeah.
be willing to let people in and to see the depth of others.
Yeah. As difficult it might be, going through doing that and going through the journey, and it's challenging, exactly to your point, it's definitely worth that journey through to express ourselves that way with one another. Truly.
Absolutely.
But my good friend, I know we're gonna have, so it hasn't been announced yet, but we're gonna have, if you will, a panel where we're gonna talk much more about anti-fragility and resilience and agility, definitely with Jodi. So a lot more to come in that space. But just respecting your time, sort of parting thoughts for this conversation, Jodi.
Parting thoughts, I would say there's a lot more that we'll talk about as far as the actual principles and implementation tactics for how you become more anti-fragile, how you can put these things into your life so that you can actually do it. Because let's face it, there are things that are more effective to do than others. And there are principles and tools that you can use. But as far as today, I would say probably the thing that I would want to leave you with is that you will have to go through this life with hope. Because if you don't believe that things are going to get better, that there is a possibility of change, then none of these other things are going to make a difference. If you see that the world is going to hell in a handbasket and you think that it's just going to get worse every single day, and you can't see that there are still those positive things happening, then, I mean, we find what we're looking for. And so when you have that hope, and when you are looking for the good, and when you're looking for opportunities to make an impact, when you understand that every interaction is an opportunity to change a life, you are looking to be present in those moments and to be someone who makes a difference. So have hope and decide that you're going to be part of that better future to come, that you're going to help create it, and that you're going to create it one moment and one interaction and one person at a time.
Thank you so much, Jodi. Tremendous all around. Definitely appreciate all the time, and definitely look forward to the next conversation, exactly to your point about some of the principles around anti-fragility, agility, and resilience, and kind of learning. But this is a very, very powerful foundation. And just some closing thoughts from my end, if you will. The journey is very powerful. I love the humanity. We shouldn't lose our humanity through our journey, as much as we struggle. And I think you're an incredible exemplar of that, quite honestly. So thank you ever so much. And then in addition, the eloquence with which you communicate it, we can all take something away. So thank you, Jodi, for making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my honor and privilege to be with you.
Likewise, dear friend. Likewise. Thank you so much, Jodi. Thanks for everyone who's joined us. And we look forward to future conversations. And again, Jodi's going to be on a panel. We'll be together, and we'll have much more conversations around agility, resilience, and anti-fragility. Thank you so much.